Here to help us break down the governor's speech and talk about how those issues may all play out during the current 60-day session is this week's line panel, starting with regulars Tom Garrity of the Garrity Group PR and Laura Sanchez-Reve. She's an attorney at Cuddy & McCarthy LLP. We welcome back to the table Catherine McGill, founder and director of the New Mexico Black History Organizing Committee. Welcome back. And Zachary Quintero, UNM law student and, more importantly, president of the Student Trial Lawyers Association. Good deal there, Zach Attack. Now, Kathy, starting with you.
Hey.
We've got not too far what the governor's proposing for a budget versus what the LFC is recommending. It's not too much of a split, but we do have some key differences here. On the budget, though, the governor's proposing about $800 million more than we have spent before, since we've got a big surplus, so to speak.
Right.
Let's start in general terms. There's some angst out there about diving into this surplus so deeply, so quickly. What was your sense of that? And a lot of folks feel like, hey, we got some ground to make up here, so it's appropriate. And some folks are saying we need to look at this closely. What's your thought?
Well, we're all saying, yikes, you know, how are we
Right.
going to do this? And but we're happy that these issues are on the table that haven't been on the table before. The governor's talking about, you know, bring her the rocket docket, and she's going to get those things passed, and she's going to get them funded. And certainly we need to be making these game-changing investments. But we also have to temper that with whether or not these are going to be recurring funds,
Right.
and if we're going to have the money there in the future to support it. So I think that, you know, what we heard was this is if everything goes well, if I'm queen for a day, this is what I want.
Right.
And we know that we're going to have to walk some of those things back and come up with some compromises. So for me, it's like, yes, I want us to have an education system that works. Yes, I want us to have clean energy industry. Yes, I want us to invest in all the things that the governor spoke about in her address. But we have to work out the details.
That's a good point there. And Laura, interestingly, or not surprisingly, I should say, education is going to be a little bit more than half of that additional money. And the governor, I'll get into some of the details of it, but in general terms, it seems like the public was sort of waiting for this in a lot of ways, just more investment in our education system. And I've heard from folks saying they feel it's like it's not enough. It should be just a start. We need even more investment than what she's proposing. But your sense of the budget proposal as she's got it laid out now, does it make sense off the top of your
Well,
head
I
there?
think that she's obviously bold, and that's a big part of what her agenda has been, is education.
Yeah.
Getting more funding for the basics, for not just teacher salaries, but also supplies. I mean, the fact that there'll be a $5 million fund for supplies that teachers shouldn't be buying out of their own
Right.
pocket.
You can hear a
That's
cheer
a
go
huge
up
thing.
across New Mexico. she said.
Absolutely, I think a
Right.
lot of people feel that pinch, you know, on a weekly basis when they see, you know, their kids don't have the right supplies. So I think that that's a huge issue. But I also think that there is, you know, there's a honeymoon period, obviously, and I anticipate that the House will be definitely in favor. There's so much fresh blood, you know, new folks in the House, that there's going to be a lot of energy and a lot of willingness to go along with the bold proposals, perhaps some of the spending stuff that she's put out there. But I expect that the Senate is really going to provide that backstop, especially Senate Finance. And in particular, when it comes to the permanent fund, because there's been a real reluctance to earmark anything from the permanent fund for early childhood education. So I think that that's going to be a contentious issue. And it'll be interesting because it's not along party lines. It's really, you know, folks who have been there for a long time dealing with the budget issues and kind of holding the line versus some bold new leadership. And so I think it'll be interesting to see where it all sort of shakes
Let
out.
me stay with you for a quick second on this because something I mentioned to Kathy, the LFC wasn't terribly far apart.
Right.
They wanted more money for teachers as well. So it's not as if she's going to have a fight with that end of the
Yeah,
hall.
I mean, I don't see
necessarily.
that that's going to be an issue. There's a lot of stuff there that I think, in general, both houses are in favor of generally. I mean, I
Right.
think they have the majorities to be able to go along with it. And, you know, I've heard it called the Singleton session. This is Judge Singleton's, you know, that's sort of hanging over everything, that decision, the Yazzie decision that requires that there be more equitable funding.
That's right.
And so it sounds like that was definitely something that was included in her speech and something that the legislators in general are very aware of. So there's going to be some common ground in that. But I think we're still going to see some differences, I think, in the specifics.
That's right. Now, she's not unaware, she being the governor, sorry, Zach, she's not unaware of this idea that the rainy day fund, you know, is there for a reason. We have to have something for us. But she also proposed that she would, her plan also calls for roughly 25% of the state spending, or nearly $1.8 billion, to be set aside in cash reserves in case projected revenue levels, as Kathy mentioned, kind of come back down to earth a little bit.
Yeah.
Does that feel responsible? You know what I mean? She's looking at all sides here. Do you agree with that?
No, I completely agree. I think this is going to be a responsible framework for a coalition to be built around to get meaningful legislation passed.
Right.
And I think the governor is going to be very tactical on how she's going to go about pushing for public education. But she made it very clear straight out of the gate that this is going to be a session for New Mexico families. This is going to be about fighting for the little guy, the everyday person that is going to be struggling in New Mexico. When you're a teacher, you know, being paid the wages you are right now, it's tough to not only raise a family but continue to serve here.
That's right.
So getting a teacher pay increase, being able to set aside funds, the $5 million for school supplies, to my mom, that would have made the difference. That's
Right.
huge.
It's
So,
amazing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
So it is responsible budget making.
Exactly right. Tom, the idea that we've got, I'm getting into some of the details of some other budget things, like say $500,000 for a new ethics commission. And it's interesting, the reason I bring that up is I don't think anyone's opposed to funding the ethics commission, but did we know ahead of time what it was supposed to cost? You know what I mean? Is it just a number?
Surprise.
Exactly. I mean, no one was really out there, and that's just one example. And surely things will come down to earth a little bit on this, but in general terms, again, do you feel like she's shooting too far over the moon here, or is this something that the public's waiting for? She's just responding to the mandate.
Well, the governor definitely called it a moonshot for
Yeah.
education, and
Good point.
a lot of her budget proposals are living up to expectation. With respect to the ethics commission, even though I wasn't one who was in favor of it, all these things that are voted in, they cost money, real money, and
Yep.
that $500,000 is, I'm sure, would just be the tip of the iceberg on that. But some of the other areas that I saw that the LFC and the governor are off really focus on economic development.
Right.
You have a lot of focus on the film industry. However, the governor and the LFC are worlds apart on how to make up a $300 million deficit as far as to make up those tax credits. And then the other is a lot of the funding for the LEDA funds, or the incentive funds to bring corporations in.
Let's talk about that.
The
Absolutely.
governor is calling for $75 million under the governor's plan, and the LFC is only calling for $4 million.
Big difference.
It is, and so obviously her new secretary, Alicia Keys, is going to have for economic development, is going to have her work cut out for her to try and win those advocates, and perhaps it could be one of those things that the LFC is just saying, you know what, this is a negotiating point for us. Because one of the key points of the governor's campaign was to talk about the poor state of the economy. In fact, I think most everybody who won election this go-around in the House, Senate, and the fourth floor all campaigned on a really bad economy. And so, really this kind of disparity between 75 million compared to 5 million is not necessarily a good start, but I think is probably, hopefully, just a negotiating.
It's almost like she's seen the LEDA thing as it's working. We have proof that it's working, and she wants to really spin it out there, just really take it to a whole nother place. 4 million is not going to get us there, so we'll see where that number sort of settles in the middle there. That's kind of interesting. Teacher raises, Kathy. I mean, we sort of touched on it a little bit, but again, it's going to cost. I can't imagine that folks would be that opposed to this, but you never know.
Right.
And that this could be a negotiating point for the governor as well at some point.
Right.
But we don't have a Secretary of Education at this point to lead the charge on
There's
that.
an
So it's
acting
gonna-
one.
I'm sorry?
There's an acting
There's an acting one, that's true. And that would be interesting to see if our lieutenant governor was the one that actually bangs the gavel, so
Right.
to speak, on getting more money for education and really kind of getting after that.
Well, I mean, the speech was prefaced on this is the moment. This is our time to make a game-changing investment in education.
Right.
And obviously, teachers' pay needs to be increased. The morale among teachers is so low.
That's right.
Talked to several teachers who, I'll give an example of one woman who went back to school late in life and got her degree, became a teacher, and on social media she is posting, why did I decide to go do this?
Oh, dear.
Teachers have, are treated, poorly treated, they're underpaid, and she's having struggles providing for her family. So I don't think that there's going to be anybody who says that we don't need to increase the pay for teachers, but also understanding that that's not the only thing that we need to do.
That's right. Zach, state employees are going to get a raise.
Yes.
And
Yeah, it's about
that's
time.
interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's always been a bit of pushback from a certain part of our population that feels like government's too big.
Okay.
People are overpaid. you know, we need to slim down government. That's going to be an argument, isn't it, that for the folks that want small government
It's
here?
the same argument, and it hasn't changed in how long? 80 years?
True.
You know, but you know, the services that we depend upon as a society are run by honest, hardworking people, and those hardworking people haven't seen a raise, so it's high time they get one.
Mm-hmm. Would you anticipate that, I'm going to throw in the minimum wage here as well? There's another
Yes.
fight that's coming up for sure. What did you make of her proposal there? She wants to go to 10 and 12 and then use a cost of living index after that, after a certain period of time.
I think it also reflects the priority for the budget too, because it's responsible policy making. We're looking at a leap on some levels for some businesses to go to $10 for small businesses, but other businesses can easily make that demand.
Right.
But the other part that is going to be interesting is when we index it to inflation. That way it doesn't become a poverty wage. We actually get to level out and meet the demands that were expected. So families working multiple part-time jobs, which is often the story in New Mexico,
Right.
will be able to go to bed with a little bit more confidence with this kind of a proposal.
Tom, did you hear anything that was left out that you were waiting to hear from the governor on her budget side of the proposal?
I wouldn't say it was left out. There were a lot of things that were added in as far as our priorities that really didn't have a funding aspect to it.
Right.
That I think we're going to talk about next segment. But just to kind of play off of what Zach was addressing, the governor got out her dollar level. Okay, she says $10 an hour, whereas with the Martinez administration, everybody's like, well, what's the magic number? Is it $9.50 an hour? Is it $9.25? And so I like that kind of leadership, just saying, you know what, here's where the bar is. Now, the legislators will actually, they'll have a field day with that because they'll know exactly what the pressure point is.
Right.
But as far as other things are concerned, as far as things that were left out, how do you handle medical marijuana?
Not even brought up.
You
That's
know,
right.
it was a campaign issue that was mentioned, but it wasn't necessarily talked about from a funding perspective.
That's right.
The
Interesting
same
point
thing
there.
with guns.
That's right.
And again, it was brought up, but didn't have a funding mechanism
Right.
tied to
That's
it as
right.
well.
Good point there. That's all the time we have for that for right now. But when we come back to the line, we'll talk about some of the governor's other priorities, ones that may not have gotten as much attention as the ones we've talked about so far.